Recorded.
Pursuant to Governor Baker's March 12, 2020 order suspending certain provisions of the open meeting law, General Law, Chapter 38, Section 18, and the Governor's March 15, 2020 order concerning imposition on strict limitations on the number of people that may gather in one place, meetings in the town of Upton are being conducted via remote participation to the greatest extent possible. No in-person attendance of members of the public will be permitted, but every effort will be made to ensure that the public can adequately access the proceedings as provided for in the order. So this evening we have discussion items 2.1, discuss extending the tax bill due date, penalties and/or fees that may apply. New business. We have public comment and adjourn meeting. So we'll start at 2.1, discuss extending the tax bill due date. In front of us, we have the information that we'll need if we wish to extend the property tax date from May 1st to June 1st. We would need to adopt the local option of Section 10A 1 and 2 and 10A Section 4 and Section 11 of Chapter 53 of the Act of 2020. And our motion would need to include all that. So Derek, I'm going to bounce this over to you. If you could talk about this for just a little bit. And then I think that the question that probably is on all of our minds is how will this affect people that have, let's say, automatic withdrawal on their mortgages and also have the tax, the property tax that's included or escrowed into their mortgage payment. How will that affect all that?
Okay, so this, I just for everybody's viewing pleasure, I have listed the 3 items to be discussed tonight, and I also listed recommendation in this case by the treasurer collector and the town accountant, and this is to as you mentioned, to postpone the due date for the real estate and property tax bills from May 1st to June 1st. Relative to your question about escrow, we believe that those individuals that pay their taxes through escrow, through their mortgage holder, that payment will continue unless the bank itself were to withhold that. We are obligated through the statute to notify all of the property owners in town, and they've given us examples of how we have to notify them. They do not require us to make notice to the banks and the mortgage holders. So it would be my belief that if an individual wanted to speak directly to their bank to withhold their property tax, they would have the ability to do such.
Okay. Maureen or Brett, do you have any comments or questions?
No, I would agree with what Derek has just said.
Okay, I mean, it's certainly goodwill to extend this option to the taxpayers. In my opinion, I definitely would be in favor of doing this.
Yes.
Do we have any feedback from either the assessors or the treasurer collector and town accountant as to why they wouldn't want to adopt Section 11, Chapter 53 to waive the interest and penalties for late payment?
I can attempt to answer that. Kenny, are you here?
I'm here.
Good.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes, this is Kenny Costa, town accountant. Yes, so there's Section 11 of the law of the Governor's Act, and that would be any tax. It could be water, sewer, motor vehicle excise that was due after March 10th through June 30th. So that would waive any penalties or interest. The concern that I would have, and also talking to my colleagues across the state, are actually twofold. One is whether, as far as setting it up in data and setting up the system and monitoring it. So there would be a lot of extra work and a lot of extra attention to detail by the treasurer collector's office as they're taking in these payments to ensure that the correct penalty interest, because there could be payments after June 30th because the clock stops on June 30th. So then there would be that calculation after June 30th and the payments are received after that to ensure it's the correct amount. And then the second fold would be just a concern of fiscal year, that fourth quarter, fiscal year 20 payment, to ensure that it actually would hit June 30th. Because if any payments crossed into, let's say, even July 1st, that would be counted towards fiscal year 21. And that wouldn't be captured in fiscal year 20. And the concern is, fourth quarter, we're talking about $5 million. So $5 million, we're counting on that, and that's part of the budget. We're counting that on for fiscal year 20. If that $5 million actually hits fiscal year 21, I would be very concerned as of the June 30th date, how much would that actually be counted towards fiscal year 20? And we don't, my biggest concern is just having a deficit or having a negative undesignated fund balance, which then just rolls into negative free cash. So that would be, my concern, because it's such a big number, and as everybody knows, it's a major revenue source of the town. So, as I'm seeing across a lot of other communities, I'm seeing a lot of the May 1st to June 1st, tax deadline being extended, and then also for exemptions and tax deferrals. So those are the two, which is in the Section 10. I've been seeing that across the Commonwealth, as commonplace, but not so much on the interest and penalty side because of those two complications that I mentioned.
So I understand the time effort of making calculations and tracking all of the penalties and late payments that would fall and the interest that would fall into this category. The 4 to 5 million, that doesn't apply. That's really about Section 10. So I think pushing all the due dates to June 1st makes sense because we need that window to collect that $4 to $5 million or $5 million for Q4. The thing I really wonder about is our ability to waive the interest and penalties for late payments. So I think that if there are, I wouldn't expect that there will be a lot of late payments, but in a scenario where there is a late payment, I don't know what or how hard it would be to track that. The only thing I would say is, from my perspective, I know that there are a lot of companies, certainly, whether it's auto financing companies, loan offering companies, personal loan, private loan, mortgage companies that are waiving any late payment fees and any interest based on those late payments, extra interest, accumulated interest for those late payments. So I would be in favor of adopting Section 11, Chapter 53, because I think that however much time and effort it would take us to do those calculations, that it would pale in comparison to the people that would be benefiting it from it, that aren't in a position to pay those bills because of some impact from COVID.
If I could just make a comment, my concern would be by waiving the penalties and interest for any late payment through up to June 30th, we are in essence really moving the due date to June 30th. And so if there is no penalty for not having paid on June 1st, then those individuals really can go to June 30th without any penalty.
And
I think from what I see, every day, emails that we've received from whether it be MMA or KP Law or whatnot, it seems like many entities of the government, as well as Brett had mentioned recently, mortgage companies, different lenders, whoever they may be, they're allowing deferrals. I believe it's of up to 90 days. So, I would also be inclined to think that I understand what you're saying, Derek, as far as, those June 1st payments may not come in till June 30th. But, again, I feel that we're in uncharted waters, where we've never had this type of a pandemic hit us before. I think it would be certainly a good faith effort on the board to extend that courtesy to the taxpayers.
I would tend to agree with Derek. If we don't have them due on June 1st and they come in after June 30th, this impacts our budget for 2020. And we have budgeted at full collections as of May 1st, and now you're pushing the date out to June 30th, which brings us into another fiscal year.
So, I mean, I definitely appreciate that. I think that there clearly is some accounting challenges. There'd be some financing challenges in terms of how to address all of this. There would be extra work involved with having to manage the process. Again, I can't help but feel like whatever effort we would need to make would pale in comparison to the real life challenges that people are facing every day and trying to pay their bills. So for me personally, to think about somebody that can't afford to pay their bills and is struggling to work or find childcare, and has to worry about paying their taxes and can't pay their taxes, or they're scraping by to pay their taxes, but then they're going to get a fee or they're paying extra interest. It doesn't seem like a scenario where our need to manage our accounting and financing and keep things within a fiscal year would be important enough to create a challenge or an additional challenge on the backs of the people of the town of Upton. I think that this issue is going to impact every organization around the world that deals with money, be it local, state, federal, private, nonprofit. Nobody is going to be confining the impact from this to the fiscal 2020 year. It's going to be a multi-year impact, and we may need to take a couple of years to recover from this as a town in terms of our finances, but we're all going to be in the same boat, and we've got one chance to do what we can to help the taxpayers and help the people in this town get through the next couple of months.
I understand what you're saying, Brett, but the town has its bills to pay too, and without the collection of the funds, and the state has not addressed this yet, nor has the federal government. And I would disagree with the June 30th date and go with the June 1st.
I mean, the fiscal year begins July 1st. So in theory, unless I missed something, Kenny Cost is still on the line. Payments that come in any time before July 1st, I would think would still be earmarked as, revenues that were collected for, the fiscal year of 2020.
Correct.
Is that correct,
Correct.
Kenny?
So if any payments come in through June 30th, yes, they'll be credited to fiscal year 20. The other concern that I just thought of now is there's also cash flow concerns as well. As I mentioned, Q4 it's about $5 million of potential revenue, and on July 1st, even in June, we're making payments to the regional school assessments, and they also have to pay for the retirement assessments too. So we have bills as well. So the bills don't stop. So the thing is, we also have to think about the treasurer's office about making these payments and having the cash flow, having the money in the bank, because we can't default on these other obligations of the town. So that's another consideration as well.
We have We have a lot more resources available to us as a municipality than a lot of the people that we serve and represent. We have stabilization money, we have free cash money. I'm confident that of the $5 million that's due in Q4, what we're talking about potentially not being collected is a extremely small fraction of that number. And so I firmly believe that we would not be in a position of having to default on any of our payments that would become due because of the changes that we'd be making by adopting both of these acts.
So if you're going to hit stabilization of free cash, our warrant is already closed, correct, Eric?
That's correct.
And the only way that we could access those funds is with the town meeting. So we would have to call another town meeting.
Yeah, or we'd have
That's right.
to reopen the warrant.
I think is Kelly still here?
We haven't executed the warrant yet. So again, I think that's a consideration that I don't think we'd actually have a shortfall until we were sometime into the new year. I'm not sure that we need to address it until we actually know there's a shortfall.
Agreed.
So it would be my thinking that, if for some reason we did have to take money out of stabilization, let's just use that as an example, and that shortfall came, sometime in July or sometime in August, we would have to call a special town meeting to address that problem at that point in time. I don't know, exactly what our cash position is right now, but I'm thinking that we're not, anywhere near a deficit.
Mr. Chairman.
Go ahead, Paul.
Steve?
Yes, go ahead, Paul. Did you have a comment or a question?
No, just a comment that you're talking about paying bills in August and September or whenever it is. Now you're into fiscal 21. So anything at that point in time would be come out of your fiscal 21 budget. And I was going to point out earlier the same thing that Maureen pointed out, that if you want to access free cash or you want to access stabilization, it requires a town meeting, and to do stabilization, it requires a 2/3 vote of the town meeting to do this. And I fully appreciate everything that Brett has put forward, but I have to go along with the position of Mrs. Maureen and Mr. Accountant that that would be best off keeping that due date as June 1st as opposed to June 30th.
I just want to be clear, because it seems like there's a lot of confusion between Maureen and Paul have both said the same thing. The taxes will be due on June 1st. Section 10 are A 1 through 3 of Chapter 53 and Section 10A4 of Chapter 53. Both Steve and I support, which is shifting the due date for the taxes to June 1st. The only additional thing that I'm proposing is on number 3 that's on the screen, which is Section 11, Chapter 53, instead of Section 10, Section 11, with specific regard towards interest and penalties for any late payments made up until June 30th. So the only thing that we're extending from now to June 30th is interest and penalties, and we're forgiving the interest and penalties. That's all. So the taxes are due on June 1st. We all agree the taxes are due June 1st, but if they come in after June 1st, but before June 30th, we're waiving any fees and penalties. These two acts were meant to be used together. One is to defer when the payments are due until June 1st to give some relief. The second is to say to people, hey, you know what? If you can't make it by June 1st, we're going to give you a little bit of relief until June 30th, and at least we're going to waive the interest in the fees to give people a little bit of relief. I'm sure, myself included, many people will still pay their taxes on the due date, which is June 1st. There's going to be some people that don't. They're still going to have to pay them by June 30th if they want to avoid the interest and fees. So that's all this is. The due date is June 1st. We're waiving taxes and penalties from now until June 30th. That's it. So do people understand the difference between the June 1 date and the June 30 date?
That's kind of what I was alluding to earlier, which is the monies are still coming in before the end of the fiscal year. So there's really no need to panic until you get into August. And that's assuming you had, hundreds or 1,000 households that did not pay prior to June 30th.
And mark my word, that's not going to happen. People are going to pay their taxes.
Right. I think another interesting question we may want to ask Kenny Costa, if he is still on the line, is, so we've established the difference, what we're talking about here with the due date, no interest till June 30th. Sometime in July, if someone were to make a payment on make their tax bill payment, how much interest is accrued? Does the interest revert all the way back to June 1st?
According to the law, it reverts back to the date of issue.
So May 1st?
No, the date of issue, April 1st.
Is that okay? I did not read that. Where did you see that, Maureen?
Well, that's Mass General Law. That would be
Okay.
under the Board of Assessors.
Okay. Kenny Costa, does that sound accurate? Not that I'm doubting you, Maureen. I just want to make sure that we
No,
have
that's
that.
fine. A lot of things have changed. Maybe that did. I don't think so, though.
Or I don't know if Kenny or Tracy may have that answer. I guess that would be the only thing, Brett, just so that people that are listening would understand it in full. If you were to make a payment, let's just say you're late, you didn't have the money, and you made the payment sometime in July, the interest would then revert back to when?
April 1st, according to the law.
Well, I think what we're talking about is the question Steve's asking is because we're adopting these special acts that have been created for the current scenario, does that also change the way the late fees and interest would be calculated? Would they calculate starting July 1? Oh, Kenny's here. Go ahead, Kenny. Do you know?
I'm actually reading the local option right now. I'm just verifying. My understanding, I thought it was June 30th but I'm just reading, just verifying this actually.
I mean, that would make sense. It would seem silly to say to somebody, if you pay on June 30th, you don't have to pay any interest or penalties, but if you pay July 1st, you pay interest and penalties back to April 1st when the bill was issued. I mean, I get it, but it doesn't seem like that would be the spirit of the act.
I don't see anything that I've read through the state that has allowed it to be anything else but.
I think that's what Kenny's looking at now.
Yeah, I mean, right now the government is pretty fluid. There's a lot of changes every day. It seems, well, I don't want to say every day, but at least on a weekly basis, there's new information coming out, and they're amending.
Yeah, it actually doesn't specify, and so I'm looking at section 11. It doesn't talk about, as far as how to calculate the penalties interest. They're just saying now it's just through June 30th, 2020. They don't address that.
Okay.
And again, so it's unfortunate that we don't have that answer, but again, we're talking about a fraction of the taxpayers that would end up in this scenario. And frankly, we have people in this scenario every single year that don't pay their taxes when they're due, right? We have a certain number of people that just don't pay their taxes. So, however we would normally handle that is at a minimum how we would handle it in this scenario. If the interest has to go back to April 1, it goes back to April 1. Either way, we're still taking care of people as much as we can. And the people that just can't pay would, they'd be in the same position they would have been had we not done anything to help everyone else. So they're no worse off.
But I think that should be made clear.
Go ahead, Maureen, you want to finish what you were saying, and then Kenny, I'll ask you to finish your comments.
Well, I think that should be made very clear to the taxpayers. If you're going to set the tax bill due date to June 1st, and then you're not going to have any penalties, but on July 1st, if you pay, you got to go back to April 1st. They have to understand that.
Great.
Okay, well, I think it would be my thinking, as quickly as we can ascertain that information, we should be sure to get that information out, assuming that this is the way we're going to go with this particular discussion item. Kenny Costa, did you have something else?
Well, I was just going to say, I'm sure the state will come out with another bulletin or with another IGR as far as how to calculate the interest. And my concern is, a lot of taxpayers, they will see this and they'll say, well, I don't have a penalty if I pay by June 30th. So my concern is if they just really wait until last minute, June 30th, and some of these payments may cost fiscal years into July, that's my concern as far as cash flow and making sure that the cash is being recorded to fiscal year 20, and also being the ability of having the town to pay for it, because there's a lot of bills that are due right on July 1st. I can tell you the school assessment, it's due on July 1st. I run a special warrant for that, and then there's also the assessment. So on July 1st, we have approximately $2 million of cash going out the door. So, I'd be looking for the Treasurer's Office to ensure, I don't want to print a bad check that's going to bounce. So that's one of my biggest concerns on July 1st, is to make sure there's enough money in the bank in order for the town to pay those bills.
So,
Go ahead.
no, I was just going to say, so just to be clear, we're not going to write any checks that are going to bounce. So don't worry about that. The other thing I would say is we've got 2.5 months to figure out exactly where we stand and how things are evolving, and to get more information about how exactly this will work, how we might pay these assessments that are due on July 1st. If we get to a point where we realize we're in some sort of extremis and we're into June and we're in this absolutely terrible position financially and we're not able to pay certain obligations as of July 1st, I've got to believe that we'll be able to work with other organizations, and that we won't be the only municipality in the state that would be in that situation or that position, and that we would be in a position to negotiate or explain to people the dire circumstances we're in and say, hey, you've got to give us more time, or we're going to pay this in 15 days or 30 days. We have to have a special town meeting to release money from free cash or stabilization. These are extraordinary times, and I don't want to not do something that benefits the people of Upton because we're afraid of some possible scenario, however unlikely it may be. I think we need to do everything we can and everything in our power to do the right thing now for the people of Upton, and whatever comes going forward, we'll deal with that. We have really smart, hardworking, intelligent, experienced people running this town, and I'm sure we can figure out a way to get through it.
Steve?
Could I just make
Go
another?
ahead, Maureen. Yes, Maureen, go ahead.
It's not just bills that are due July 1st. You have anything that the town has purchased, any contracts that they have out there, their payrolls. Everything depends on what we collect this year to pay our bills.
That is true. Again,
So it doesn't mean just what's due July 1st. It's everything that we're doing now.
Steve?
but we have seen, again, from almost daily updates with respect to the state, and it's looking like a lot of these deadlines are going to be moved. Obviously, town meetings, annual elections. Again, Paul, you mentioned it, I think, at the last meeting. Schools are now going to be allowed to operate on a 1/12 budget, assuming that their budgets for fiscal 21 haven't been passed.
Steve, it's municipalities can run on a 1/12 budget.
As can the school. It was just in an email this evening.
Can I make an observation or ask a question?
Yes, you said you had a question, Mr. Flaherty. Go ahead.
Well, to my good friend, Mr. Accountant, Maureen could probably help out weigh in this as well. I believe we have a general article that's always on the Article 3 or 4, the annual town meeting, which allows the town to borrow in anticipation of revenue. It was always there to give the town the opportunity to have money in case they needed it before the tax bills came in. It's my understanding and my recollection is that we've never had to exercise this borrowing capacity since we went to quarterly tax bills because it always permitted your cash flow. So if we have this blanket authorization to borrow in anticipation of revenue, now I understand that it's probably be a bookkeeping nightmare for the treasurer and the accountant, but wouldn't that be a way to go about this and, not really interrupt your cash flow? Maureen? Ken?
Yes.
Correct.
Help me out.
Revenue anticipation borrowing.
Patient note.
Now, the town accountant and the treasurer's office are going to have to get together to see what they're going to need to get them through the end of the year. And that 1/12 budget is for FY21, not FY20.
Oh, I understand that.
Yeah, I'm just saying, I mean, we can't use the 1/12 budget to pay for what we don't have in FY20.
My point was to really establish the fact that there is an avenue to avoid any shortfall for 2020.
Yes, there is an avenue, and
Yes.
that is revenue anticipation borrowing. But they got to get on that right away.
Right. I think we have
Correct.
multiple ways to solve the problem. We don't have a problem yet. Let's take this step by step. I don't want to look at this with a kind of a doomsday scenario. It's a matter of let's come back full circle. Where do we stand on this? Maureen, are you good with this? Brett, are you ready to make a motion? Is there any new information before we declare that we're going to have shortfalls and declare that we need another way to cover the budget? We don't know if any of those things are true. Let's just look at what we have in front of us.
Well, I support adopting all three of these, and I will. I'm not doing it now, but my intent would be to make a motion on all three of these to pass them or to adopt them.
Okay.
I am good with 1 and 2,
Okay.
and I would be in favor of that.
So, Maureen, you said you're in favor of 10A, 1 and 2?
Yes.
I'm in favor of all of them. So if you want to make a motion, Brett, you want to motion them all as one in one motion?
I don't know, Kelly or Sandy, what's the best way, or Derek? What do we need to do these each individually?
Yes, each one of them has to be done individually.
Okay. So I move that the Board of Selectmen, in accordance with sections 10A 1 through 3 of Chapter 53 of the Acts of 2020, extend the due date of real estate and personal property tax bills under GLC 59, subsection 57, 57C from May 1, 2020 to a date not later than June 1st, 2020. Brett Simus, aye.
Maureen Dwinell, aye.
Stephen Mattelli, aye. Brett, was 10A section 4 supposed to be in there?
Section 4 is the next one. It's in number 2 below.
Yep.
Section 11, 4. Okay.
So the second one here, number 2, is I move that the Board of Selectmen, in accordance with sections 10A 4 of Chapter 53 of the Acts of 2020, to extend the due date of exemption and tax deferral applications from April 1st, 2020 to June 1st, 2020. Brett Simus, aye.
Maureen Dwinell, aye.
Stephen Mattelli, aye.
And then the third one, number 3 here, is I move that the Board of Selectmen, in accordance with Section 11 of Chapter 53 of the Acts of 2020, waive interest and other penalties for late payment of any real estate, personal property, or excise tax bill with a due date on or after March 10th, 2020, where payment is made after its respective due date, but before June 30th, 2020. Brett Simus, aye.
Maureen Dwinell, no.
Stephen Metellian, aye. So Sandy, you can mark that majority action. Okay, moving on. Section 3.0, we have new business. I just wanted to bring something up. I've had in the past few days some questions and concerns from a few of the part-time and all-call fire and EMT workers. They're concerned that they do not have adequate coverage, not from the standpoint of personal protective gear, but that they don't have correct insurance coverage in the case that they were to be infected by COVID-19. I know we brought this up, I think, at a different meeting. Derek, do you have anything on this?
Sure, I can answer that. So I have been working very closely with the fire and the police unions. They have raised this as a concern. So let me answer the question about insurance first. So the town has substantial insurance coverage for any one of our first responders or any one of our employees who were to contract an infectious disease in the line of duty. The rub on that is that you have to draw a service connection related illness during your time at work. And so it's very difficult to say that an individual was exposed to, in this case, COVID-19 at work, and that's how they were infected. So, and that's kind of been the concern right along. But our insurance, substantial insurance that provides that type of coverage. And, you know, I've talked with both fire and police chiefs, and I have explained to them my concern that we need to do as much as we possibly can to document every one of our exposures. Even if it's benign, document your exposure so that we could always circle back within 14 days to all of our contacts to determine whether or not one of those contacts had tested positive for COVID-19. So that's the first thing we're doing. So just trying to educate them. And again, I explained everything I'm explaining to you right now. I explained yesterday to the fire and police union reps that it's my expectation that we are extremely vigilant in how we document from this point forward. And they seem to understand that. So that's the first issue. The second issue is, you know, they argue that they are high-risk individuals, and we would all agree that fire and police certainly, you know, they're out there day in and day out, you know, whether they're responding to patients or they're in the face of public on a regular basis. And so they asked for further protection than what the Family Care Act provides. So just so you know, the CARE Act provides for 80 hours of any employee who were to be infected with COVID-19 would get 80 hours of emergency paid time off. So they wouldn't have to use their own benefits, and they would still, you know, get 100% of their salary and all the other benefits if they were to contract it. So again, they don't think 80 hours is enough. So we have come to a verbal agreement that the town would cover for our first responders those individuals that needed longer recovery time than the 80 hours that's being provided through the Federal CARE Act, that the town would ensure that we cover those individuals during their recovery period. So there are some stipulations in that agreement that I have asked for, such as that the town can order testing when necessary, that the town can order an independent physician's exam if we wanted to get a better sense of the stage of recovery the individual is in. So that was proposed to the unions today. They are reviewing it. We're going back on some minor language changes, but we feel like we're all in a place where they feel like they have protection through the town, and the town is also protected that we're not going to expose ourselves to an individual that may have been infected outside the workplace.
Okay. You could just let us know how that goes. You said they're in the review process now. So probably.
That's right. They have it. They received it. We turned over a proposed MOA in less than 12 hours to the unions. They received that this morning. Again, there was some language items that were missing from it, which they have, and so we're going back and forth and just to provide some clarity in that MOA.
Okay. Very good. Thank you. And please keep us up to date on that. Appreciate it. Anything else? Does anybody have anything under new business? Maureen, Brett?
No, I'm all set.
All set? Okay.
Steve?
Mr. Flaherty, you got a question? Yes.
You know, one thing, I had a conversation with Kelly before this meeting started that how does the town propose to notice the taxpayers that the bill is not due on May 1st? And Derek or Kelly gave me the answer, but you know, for the 12 or 13 people that'll maybe listening to this thing, you know, it might be a good idea to let them know how they unnoticed that the tax bill was not due on May 1st. Thank you.
Kelly, do you have something you'd like to say or a way to get that, broadcast that information out?
Well, Derek, we discussed it on our call yesterday with the department heads, and we thought about using the signboards that are out, the fire department signboards. We put it on there. I know neighbor to neighbors on the board outside of the town hall. We can rearrange that and make that a notice as well. And needless to say, we would put it on Twitter and the website. Lastly, we would make sure that the local cable channels were updated with it. So like everything else we've been doing with COVID, it would go out on all those avenues.
And I'm assuming too in the town crier, I'm sure they would put it in there too. So.
Yeah, and I think I have to go back on the DLS recommendations, but I think one of their recommendations to towns was to use reverse 911 as another strategy.
It's a good idea.
That's right.
Derek, the only reason I brought it up is because that bulletin there, it came out about 2 weeks ago. It included the fact that you were supposed to send them a written notice, and there was a form of the letter that was supposed to be done. And I'm saying, well, that's going to be kind of an expensive proposition to do that. So.
Right, and they retracted that. You're absolutely right, Paul. That was the original bulletin. They expected the Treasurer Collector's Office to issue letters to each household in town, but they retracted that and they offered kind of more 21st century technology strategies to get that information out.
I think the key thing is to do everything we can to get the word out as quickly as possible, because I think the more we can do to have one less thing people can worry about, the better. So I know everybody would do that anyway, but just to say it.
Right. All right. Any other comments under new business?
Yeah, just one other small thing I just wanted to talk about. I think some people may have heard this or seen it. We closed down, or the Board of Health made a decision to close down the play structure, playground, the places with basketball hoops, and other play structures. And there was some feedback about the picnic tables at some of the parks and locations. So there's one at Wildwood specifically that came up, but then Derek and Dennis pointed out that there are a few other picnic tables around town. There's one by the library, and it was commented that we should consider having those removed temporarily. Again, just to eliminate one surface. It's partly optics. It's partly the optics of it, but it's also some practicality to say, you know what, it's one less place that someone's going to sit down or gather, or sit there with the kids for 5 minutes, and then another family comes and sits down. That it might be prudent to just have those removed. I think, Derek, you said there was 5 or 6 picnic tables or benches around town that Dennis would need to pick up.
Yeah, it's probably around 6 in total between benches and tables. 2 at Wildwood, 1 table at the library pointed out, and a couple benches over at the town common.
So
Are those easy enough those aren't anchored to the ground, are they, Derek, where at the town common?
To my knowledge, no. I did some research in anticipation of this conversation tonight, and Dennis believes that it would be easy enough for them to send a crew out tomorrow just to pick them up, bring them down to DPW barn, store them until, we break from all this virus stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Any
All right.
concerns with that?
I'm sorry, I didn't hear you.
I was just saying, any concerns with that or any reason we wouldn't ask Dennis to do that?
I guess it's a fine line. I mean, the benches on the town common, picnic tables, yeah, I think I understand. I think that, certainly is a good safety precaution. The town common with the benches, I'm not sure how I feel about that.
I'm wondering if I could be dreaming, but I thought those benches were like attached to concrete or like granite sides. Is that not? Are they just benches that are placed there? Does anyone know?
That's kind of what I'm thinking. I was thinking that they were kind of anchored to the ground.
No. Derek, do you know?
I'm not certain. That's something, again, we would.
Yeah.
Dennis didn't believe, he suggested he could remove them very easily.
Okay.
I don't know if they're anchored. Maybe he knows they're anchored and they have to use a ratchet set to remove them. I'm not sure.
Yeah, either way, if I defer to Dennis, I agree, Steve. If it's a big thing or they're anchored or in some way that, I definitely don't want to do any damage, certainly not to anything on the common. No machines to dig up concrete or granite. Like this should be like, pick them up, put them in the back of a truck, take them to the DPW. Like if it's more than that, then we should just leave them or put a sign on them not to sit there.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, I would agree with that. Maureen, what are your thoughts on the picnic tables and the benches?
No, what you said would be good.
Okay.
If they are anchored, I can work with the DPW and we can get plastic and just wrap the benches in plastic so people can't sit on them.
That's a good idea.
Yeah, that may be an easy solution as well. So. All right.
That was it for me, Steve. Thank you.
Yes, very good. Anybody have any comments? Is anybody from the public weighing in? Do we have any public comment?
There were a couple of chats about the picnic tables and benches, but I think they're being answered now.
Okay.
Yeah, Lynn had asked a question about the ones at the playgrounds are going to be removed, but we've, as Selectman Simons already pointed out, the Board of Health voted on Friday in an emergency meeting to secure all entrances to playgrounds. So you will notice if you visit any one of our, I call them play areas, because that would be playgrounds, that would be basketball courts, that would be tennis courts. They've all been locked, most of them with a deadbolt. And then we have also ordered signs, and the signs have already been affixed to the entranceway that just basically states that the playgrounds have been closed due to COVID-19.
Mm-hmm.
Great.
And I don't know, Derek, Kelly, Brett, or Maureen, does anybody know? I haven't caught the news today. It sounded like the new cases in Massachusetts had leveled out, if not maybe even declined just a little bit. Is that still holding true today?
Today was Today was the highest death rate that we've had at 151 individuals.
Yeah, that's what I heard.
So right, the total death count to date is almost 1,100. And so let me give you a comparison. The total number of cases in New Hampshire is slightly north of 1,000. So we have just as many deaths in Massachusetts as New Hampshire has total cases. And total cases in Massachusetts, I think, is around 28,000 total cases.
Yeah.
28,000 total cases, yeah.
And there were 1,755 new cases today in Massachusetts.
Yeah, and I think it was right around that number yesterday, 17 or 1800 yesterday. So, all right. So we're still at I guess we're at the top of the curve, or at least we hope. All right. If there's no other public comment, we'll take a motion to adjourn the meeting.
I move that we adjourn the meeting. Maureen Dwinell, yes.
Brett Simus, yes?
Stephen Metellian, yes. All right.